Welcome to The Voice of Retail. I'm your host, Michael LeBlanc. This podcast is brought to you in conjunction with Retail Council of Canada. From Scott Galloway to Carl Boutet to Steve Dennis, savvy business leaders and retail industry thought leaders agree on one thing. The COVID era was the great acceleration of e-commerce. Best estimate, Canada stepped into a pandemic time tunnel, came out the other end 5 years later. This year, retailers big and small are starting off once again with some degree of uncertainty as a result of the evolving pandemic. One thing we do know is that Canadians are now comfortable and savvy online shoppers. In fact, a 2021 PayPal Canada study entitled Trends and Spends found Canadians across the country are spending about $2 billion more a month online. My guest on this episode of The Voice of Retail has a front seat to the past, present, and future of e-commerce and payments. Mike Monty, PayPal Canada's head of enterprise sales, and he joins me in this exclusive interview.
We've seen businesses that really, were brick and mortar kind of businesses and have entered the e-commerce game and transformed incredibly quickly.
Let's listen in now. Mike, welcome to the Voice of Retail podcast. How are you doing this morning?
Good morning, Michael. Nice to meet you on the podcast. And yeah, I'm doing pretty well today.
Yeah, fantastic. So it's afternoon where I am, but I think I'm finding you on the West Coast. Is that right?
You are. You're finding me coming to you out of Vancouver.
Fantastic. Well, listen, let's jump right in. Tell us a bit about yourself, your background, and what you do at PayPal.
Sure. I'm a bit of a weird guy. I was born in South Africa. I moved to Singapore in 1997. I spent 14 years there. Moved to Thailand for 3 years. Back to Singapore, and then I've been living in Canada now for 9 years. I run PayPal's enterprise business here, and we're really into helping large Canadian businesses solve their e-commerce and payments challenges. And prior to PayPal, I was an investor and an executive within a Canadian startup called Hyperwallet that was acquired by PayPal in 2018. So my journey in payments has, been pretty much the past 10 years, but my journey in technology has been the last 25 years.
Well, it's such an interesting background. Now, has your international experience lent you a perspective that you find unique, and do you draw on that often?
I think so. I think having lived in, different, countries as well as experiencing different cultures, makes you really value, those different opinions, those different cultures, as well as, see the value that, inclusivity brings and respect for different people and different cultures. I think that's not only helped, in my personal life, but also within my business life, and creating teams that really are high performance involves, creating teams that are inclusive and diverse, with people that have different opinions and are innovative.
Yeah, right on. Now, from a payments perspective, what drew you to payments? I mean, you started in technology. Payments at its core is very technologically focused, but it's also very innovative and creative and business. Is that what drew you to the payment space from a career perspective?
No, I started out in a software company, in the oil and gas industry originally, and ended up in sales, and then went through the dot-com boom and bust, and ended up at IBM for a couple of years, and then finally decided that I was going to take a sabbatical for 6 to 12 months. And during that sabbatical, met some very interesting people, and one of those people was invested in Hyperwallet in Vancouver. And really took a look at the technology, saw how simple it was, saw how they were making cross-border payments so much cheaper than the banks were charging, and how so much easier. Everything was digital. And I just fell in love with the technology. So it really was kind of a bit of luck, just falling into the payments landscape and seeing this technology and going, wow, I think this is the future, right?
Well, it's funny because retail is often described as the accidental career. People don't always set out to be in retail, but once they get there, they love it. All right, let's talk about PayPal. No one's listening to this podcast who would know one way, shape, or another of the brand. Probably already know a bit of its history, but take us through just the scope and scale of PayPal, just so we level set everybody so that they know what and who you do and where you act and where you operate and all that great stuff.
Sure. Sure. I mean, I think most people think of PayPal as really a button on during the checkout process on a website, right? But many people don't really, know that PayPal provides business solutions, end-to-end business solutions from small businesses through the mid-market to the very large businesses out there. And we provide multiple payment methods. We're not just the PayPal payment method. We provide credit card solutions, across all the major credit card lines. We provide alternative payment methods like Google Pay and Apple Pay. We provide fraud solutions. We provide e-commerce marketing and retargeting solutions to help merchants increase their conversion. And the thing that really sets us apart is our two-sided network. We empower more than 425 million consumers and merchants in more than 200 markets to take part in the global economy. Wow. So, it's really something that is global, and it spans from, the consumer side of our business all the way through small businesses to very, very large businesses.
I've often found is the case, and it's also the case for my listeners. There's some listeners in the retail space who are deep vertical experts on payments, but the vast amount of people who run retail may or may not have a vertical payments expert. Tell me one thing about PayPal, or at least one that would surprise the listeners, like that they were like, wow, I never realized that about PayPal. As you said, it's a very familiar brand. They often see it on checkout and they know of its capabilities. Anything that jumps to mind that you said, wow, I bet you people don't know this, and it would surprise them?
Yeah, I think, as I mentioned, the thing that tends to surprise people, and especially in Canada when we speak to them, is the fact that we're not only a payment method, that we do perform credit card processing, as an example, and all those other alternative payment methods. People generally look at PayPal as a trusted brand to buy things, and they relate PayPal to the old eBay days where PayPal was a part of eBay. And, since PayPal's gone public, it's really rocketed up in terms of the acquisitions it's made, companies like Hyperwallet and Braintree and Simility and so on that have really rounded out all these payment capabilities and given us this end-to-end solution and taken us, we often call it going beyond the button, because people see us as that button, right?
All right. Well, let's talk about, as your role, this broader role that you have in the infrastructure, let's talk about just for a minute, any observations you could share about 2021 and the recent past in terms of performance of e-commerce. Now, we all see the numbers at a high level. You guys have a front row seat in what's happening in retail transactions. Any trends you could comment on that you've observed from your chair at that unique seat as you've watched e-commerce flourish in the COVID era?
Yeah, I mean, we keep track of a lot of data, and we also commission studies, multiple times a year. And not surprisingly, digital commerce went from really being a luxury service to a necessity for survival for many businesses during the pandemic. And we saw a huge amount of growth in the e-commerce space during the pandemic. If you take a look at, in 2017, only about 19% of Canadian businesses were transacting online. In 2020, that jumped by 400%. And those numbers were from our PayPal Canada annual Business of Change study. The rush online was a necessity because Canadians are digitally savvy consumers. And, in 2021, we ran our Trends and Spends consumer study and found that Canadians increased their online shopping spend by more than $2 billion per month compared to the pre-pandemic. Most importantly, though, I think, Michael, is that our studies are showing that this is not going to let up, post-pandemic. People are not going to go back to the way they were shopping as much in-store pre-pandemic. So this will continue. We do see the e-commerce trend continuing to increase over time.
Yeah, that was going to be you took the question out of my mouth, so to speak. My next question was good. How are you thinking about 2022? We had this massive lift in e-commerce, was 70%, and then we've had a lesser lift, kind of a moderation, but still tremendous growth in 2021. But as you look forward to 2022, is it your thought you're expecting that waterline to stay stable and kind of resume normal growth? Or how do you think about, growth in e-commerce transactions and business? How are you thinking about that?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think the growth rates will slow, but they will continue to grow because we obviously saw a huge bump, and especially in the beginning of the pandemic, and that will continue in terms of growth. So we're not going to go backwards in terms of e-commerce, and the expectation really is that businesses will be able to merge that online world with their in-store world in a seamless way, so that consumers, really have a convenient way of dealing with them.
Right. There's an old saying about the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The next best time is today. Do you think that applies to e-commerce? Never too late. While there is tremendous growth, it's still not too late to get into the game.
No, that's exactly right. We've seen businesses that really, were brick and mortar kind of businesses and have entered the e-commerce game and transformed incredibly quickly through how they're presenting themselves online to consumers. So, taking that first step and getting into the e-commerce game isn't very difficult today with all the providers that are there in terms of e-commerce solutions, payments, and so on. Right, it's become easier and easier for people to get online, and once they're online and they start learning about their businesses and how consumers are reacting to them and the experiences that they're giving consumers, we see them transform their businesses really, really quickly.
Yeah, it's not a history lesson, but I launched my first e-commerce site in 96, 97, and payments was just a nightmare. Like the difference between what you and PayPal can bring to merchants of all sizes versus, what I had to deal with even at the largest retailers, such a transformation, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to the point of having a one-stop shop, right? Versus before, you would have to cobble together multiple pieces, in a solution. So it's a lot easier today for businesses to get online.
Yeah, right on. I've often called it the leveling of the playing field, right? So you get to be a merchant. You don't have to worry about stitching together or handling transactions. You've got trusted partners to kind of get that done and focus on other things.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned earlier, you talked about papers and research and thought leadership. That's one of the things that brought us here today. You recently published, as an organization, a great tips piece in cooperation with Nick's CEO, Joanna Griffiths, great Canadian retailer, great innovator. And you put together 5 recommendations for Canadian retailers. So let's go. Let's take us through your 5 top recommendations.
Yeah, the first tip, and just to say that we're massive fans of Joanna and the incredible brand that she's built. Nick's has been a PayPal merchant almost from the start, and we reached out to her because we wanted to tell the story of how she's mastered the digital space and is now branching out into traditional brick and mortar. And she's taking her digital philosophy and bringing it in store. They're a great example of an omni-channel retailer. So the first tip, Michael, is, use platforms that grow with your business. And the challenge today is remaining at the forefront of a competitive digital landscape. And being competitive means having access to important customer insights and partners that help give your customers what they want. Secure transactions, seller protection, flexible payment options, and shopping rewards. One thing that Joanna said that was important in her interview was, we partner with the best, and then we focus on what we do best. So the people at the helm of an enterprise should be focused on running their business, while their e-commerce platform helps take care of everything else, from customer conversion to ensuring transactions are protected from fraud. The second, tip was have a streamlined checkout process. And a MasterCard Global Consumer Study that came out in 2020 found that for 70% of Canadians, contactless payments are now their first choice, whereas 47% are now using contactless payments more than they did before the pandemic. So that gives us a key insight into how Canadians want to shop and pay for their purchases. In PayPal, being able to offer consumers the ability to pay how they want to pay can be really the key to a successful checkout experience, whether it be with, a PayPal digital wallet, other digital wallets with rewards, or with even, a buy now, pay later or credit solution. Flexibility is always going to be the most important aspect for consumers.
follow that thread a bit. In my past, putting in payment systems, one of the challenges you would have, or you'd have to justify whatever kind of changes you're going to make to a broader constituency of people, and you're going to say, is this actually going to increment my business? Right? We're going to spend resources and time and treasure to implement a new system or bring on a new partner. Yeah. How do we justify that? I think that's it feels like that's an easier conversation with someone like PayPal, for example. And I've done a PayPal implementation and saw the advantages of access to your big network of people who use PayPal, and B, just the frictionless, as you would say, payment. Is that your advice, and is that what you're hearing back from retailers you talk to?
Yeah, I think you just put it in your own context, right? If I walk into a store, and I'll take it from a brick and mortar example. If you walk into a store and you have a credit card that you like to use, because you get certain rewards on that card, and somebody doesn't accept that card in the store. Mm-hmm. If you really want that item, you'll probably buy it that first time. But the next time you want to buy that item, you will think twice before you go back to that store, because they don't accept the payment method that you prefer. And you probably will look for, the same product or a similar product in a store that accepts the way that is most convenient for you to pay. So, I think, giving people the experience that they want is incredibly important. You can't just provide one payment method or two payment methods anymore. People expect, to be able to pay the way they want to pay.
Right on. Now, you mentioned stores. Joanne is talking about stores, so that I think leads into your third point, this omni-channel idea of physical and bricks and mortar and e-commerce together, yeah?
Well, exactly. I mean, today's consumer is extremely digitally savvy, and they expect their shopping experience to be seamless, whether it's online or in store. They want information about the product before they step foot in the store. I know I personally go and Google everything before I go into a store and research the products that I want to buy and read the reviews on the products, right? They want to be able to pay for it with a tap of their phone when they're in the shop, and then they want to be able to buy, reorder a different color or the same product when they come home. And if they're not happy with their purchase, they want to be able to return it either online or in store without any hassle. So, a successful omni-channel engagement strategy is really fueled by customer data and insights that give, retailers a chance to develop an individual approach to marketing and retargeting their customers.
And you have, you bring that to retailers? Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, we have both a online, offering as well as a in-store offering, and especially in the small business world in Canada, we've launched QR code payments so that people were able to accept payments with a QR code and get payments from consumers into their PayPal accounts. So, most people know PayPal really as an online-only provider, but we've also branched out into the in-store world.
Well, come on, you got to agree that who knew the QR code would have a revitalization, right? I mean,
yeah, we thought it was dead.
If you and I were sitting down having a cup of coffee and a chat like this 3 years ago, we would laugh at QR codes, right? Those ugly little things. They never work. Nobody uses them well. And now, my goodness, they're everywhere, right? It's crazy.
Well, now, I mean, you can't read a menu without, a QR code on your phone.
You can't get a pint of beer. You can't get a beer at your table in some restaurants. It's so.
Well, it's funny, I always feel old, but we're teaching the young kids a thing or two with these old-fashioned QR codes now, aren't we?
It's like, this is new. Yeah, dude, it's not new. It's been around. One of the it's so interesting. One of the things I know Joanna and her business a little bit, and I know they're very principled retailers. So. Mm-hmm.
The fourth tip really was, work with partners that share your company's values, right? And we know with social media and, how connected the world is, today's consumer is very engaged. They want to know that the companies they're dealing with and giving their money to are standing up for what's right. And, take Nix, for example. They're outspoken advocates for inclusivity and social justice. And Joanna told us in our interview that she takes a critical look at her business partners to ensure their values are aligned with hers. PayPal has always prided itself on leading with the purpose of helping, democratize financial services for underserved communities. We put a real emphasis on diversity and inclusion within the business, and support, communities and charities actively.
Last but not least, let's talk about the future.
Yeah, and this comes to your point earlier about, if you haven't really been online, how easy it is to get online, and is it too late, right? The last tip really was, don't live in the past, focus on the future, and the best advice I can give is, to focus on where you want your business to be. It doesn't matter whether you were online 2 years ago or even last week. What matters is that you're taking the necessary steps to set the business up for success, for the future. As an example, we work with a company that was not online at all, and it's a big retailer, a brand that everybody would know. And they weren't online before the pandemic in any, significant way. But today, they're thriving to the point where they're not only online with their own products, but they're turning their website into a marketplace for third-party vendors. They were able to get online quickly with PayPal when they first started, but since then they've grown to accept all payments through our unbranded products, and also looking at our payout solution for their marketplaces. So, it's never too late to get online, as you mentioned earlier, Michael. It's a very quick journey once you start it.
Well, and I think you're there to help with the journey in terms of added information. So let's talk about that for a little bit. Where can they get in touch with you, and how, and where can they go to learn more, and give us all the great resources that you can put in front of folks? Yeah,
listen, the best place to go is our website, paypal.ca/enterprise. There are some good insights there, on how to get in touch with us, as well as solutions that we provide. And we really encourage people to get in touch with us so that we can have a discussion and answer any questions. And we really do approach it in a consulting kind of methodology, where we try to understand what the business challenges are, and what the directions are that the business wants to take in designing a solution, especially in the enterprise world. It's not an out-of-the-box kind of situation. Many of the large businesses have multiple different kinds of technologies within their frameworks, and we work with all of them.
Right. So, your expertise and the tool really spans from small independents all the way up to major multinationals, right? So quite a broad reach. Now, are you a LinkedIn guy? Is that a great way to get in touch with you? And what about that?
100%. Definitely on LinkedIn. You'll see me under Michael Monty, clearly working for PayPal, and happy to take reach outs on LinkedIn, and also happy to take requests through our website.
Well, listen, Mike, thanks so much for joining me on The Voice of Retail. It's been a great conversation. I mean, payments can be, at one hand, very complex. On the other hand, the art and skill, I think, of what you do is simplifying the very complex so that it is easily understandable and becomes a business strategy versus, needing to understand a lot of the other stuff. But if you need to understand a lot of the other stuff, you've got that resource too. So it's a nice blend. And I'll put links to your URL and all that contact stuff in the show notes. But for now, I wanted to wish you continued success and looking forward to hopefully meeting you in person in Vancouver. I haven't been to Vancouver for a couple of years, which is a weird thing to say in my life for all of us. But thanks again for joining me on The Voice of Retail, and wish you, as I said, continued success.
Thanks, Michael. Really enjoyed the conversation, and I wish you the same.
Thanks for tuning into this special episode of The Voice of Retail. If you haven't already, be sure and click and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform so new episodes will land automatically twice a week. And check out my other retail industry media properties, the Remarkable Retail Podcast, Conversations with Commerce Next Podcast, and the Food Professor Podcast with Dr. Sylvain Charlebois. Last but not least, if you're into barbecue, check out my all-new YouTube barbecue show, Last Request Barbecue, with new episodes each and every week. I'm your host, Michael LeBlanc, president of Michael LeBlanc Company and Maven Media. And if you're looking for more content or want to chat, follow me on LinkedIn or visit my website at emmyleblanc.co. Have a safe week, everyone.